it really starts to show what's going on behind the scenes.
So we're going to be talking about dyslexia, learning disabilities, but also from the perspective of anxiety and mental health. For those of you who don't know, Stephen Yearout's an adult who ran a podcast called Empower Dyslexia. Has that podcast. And as an adult at age 45, got remediation for his own dyslexia. And he's done podcast episodes with his mother talking about all the struggles, all the battles, all the trauma that happened at home around school failure and school struggles. Certainly, that only impacts mental health, but also impacts just family health and family function. There's also, I put a link to a research article, and that research article is talking about what's happening with emotional issues in mental health when there's a learning difficulty. And they list a whole myriad of things. And I'm looking up at it over here. It talks about externalizing behaviors where kids act out, or emotional depression or anxiety issues, internalizing behaviors, or they just can really do things that aren't healthy for themselves. Also, depression, also anxiety. There's just a whole myriad of problems that can come from continuous struggle with learning difficulties. And I think one important question to talk through with families and parents is, really, one, what can we do about it? Some families have access to remedial services, some families don't. Some families have access to, proactive, really hardworking special ed groups who are trying to build accommodations and strategies and decrease the stressors and, help make those skills stronger, and other families don't. So part of the question is what can we do about that? And how do you help change those skills? So I think Steven's resetting his video right now because the sound was garbled. But I'm going to go ahead and have a quick video as an example to say, okay, what changed for this young boy in terms of his affect? Do you think it changed his self-esteem? And what it looks like when you take away some of the stressors, and some of those stressors are things like take away the stress of actually having a learning difficulty and reading problems. And Sharon, if you want to cue this one up, just right up to when the video starts. We don't need the intro piece of it. That way we'll have spent about 60 seconds just watching this video of where his skills are at now. And this boy's going to be reading about the 5th percentile. And then it's going to switch and tell you, we did a little bit of work, and here's where his skills are after intervention. And look for the changes in affect. Look for the changes in, does body posture change? Does, expression change? Does tone change? Anything else we see that indicates that we've had an impact on self-esteem? And many of you have seen this, but other ones may have not. So let's watch this video clip real quick.
He picked the summer, no, seesaw, and summertime, and shorts. He picked pivot. It was time to get up and go to school. The children made their beds and dressed. One kid said, can I find my red shoes? Mother said,
So that just shows the boy and what he looks like when he's struggling. And, Stephen, we mentioned to folks as well, that while you're resetting, that you've lived that life of struggles, you got personal experience with it. And Kimberly's posting, yeah, that her boy's definitely anxiety ridden with reading, new people, schoolwork. There's lots of anxiety. And so we're going to talk a little bit about like what some of those common causes are. I think what I just posed as a question to our viewers today is, what do you see happening with this boy in terms of what does his presentation look like when he's struggling to read? And what does his presentation look like after he has much more effective reading skills? And one thing that really stands out for me with that video, why it's such a great example, is the start of the second video, just unprovoked, unprompted by anybody. He just raises his hand and waves at the camera, and he's just beaming ear to ear. He cannot wait to show you how much stronger his reading skills are because he's been, able to make some significant progress. And Chrissy mentions that, yeah, she noticed also how less activated he is. Like before, it was just like painful, almost writhing on the table. Now, it doesn't mean that he sat perfectly still. He's still got his hands up in his hat and, his body's moving a bit, but it doesn't have the same tone of angst and struggle and, humiliation and frustration. And I think that's one real key thing to figure out when we're looking at anxiety and trying to decide, is this an anxiety problem that can lead to struggles academically? Or is it academic struggles that have been around so long and keep perpetuating that they're now causing anxiety problems? They're now causing secondary difficulties. And in the clinic environment, at a Morris Center clinic, we have a very controlled environment. We can watch and see as the struggles become less and less difficult, easier and easier to do, does anxiety become less and less as well? And they have less anxiety as the struggles decrease. If that's the case, then we have pretty clear indication that the anxiety was secondary to learning difficulties. And in psychology, we talk about it from the context of state versus trait anxiety. State's kind of like a situation. There's an event that really triggers your anxiety. Like, Kimberly mentioned, meeting new people is an event that triggers anxiety, or schoolwork for her son triggers anxiety. Trait anxiety is you're a person who's anxious at all situations, same situation repeatedly, you're still anxious about it. It's just a constant state of higher anxiety, higher worry and concern. And really delineating those two is a very easy first step to figure out what's going to do to help change that. But Stephen, what are your thoughts about that boy and his change over time?
Much like you said, when you start seeing that certain behavior, the head on the ground, a head on the desk, just completely disengaged, it really starts to show what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, I can see myself every time in that little boy, every time I see that video, because I remember vividly laying my head on the desk, trying to read or, write a paper or whatever, your arms all twisted up, trying to just keep yourself engaged enough to do the activity. And that's about as much as you have. So if that's about as much effort as you could put in it, um, you'll never be able to sound any of the words out. You'll never be able to remember what it is that you're reading.
Yeah.
And it's not due to a lack of wanting. It's due to a lack of knowing you can't.
Yeah.
I try to explain it to people. I ask them this question, and I'll ask you the same question. What subject in school did you absolutely just bomb at? Other than like reading, there everybody has that thing in school where they are not able to do those things, right? Some people it's sports, running, basketball, some people it's art, some other people it's reading, right?
Mhm.
Well, I was having this discussion with this guy, and he's like, "I'm an avid reader, and I love to read, and I just don't understand why anybody wouldn't be able to read, and why wouldn't anybody wouldn't want to sit down and really read. And I go, okay. I asked him that question. Well, I asked him it in this way: what were you horrible at in school? And he goes, well, PE. And I go, okay, great. I said, so what if in every class you started it out with, I don't know, running a mile? You had to run a mile in every class first before you ever started doing anything. He said, oh, I would hate school. I said, welcome to dyslexia. And that brought it home for him, right? He could understand it. I brought it to a situation that, that he could really understand. And really, that's what we have to do to get others to understand. It's not a lack of want to. It's not a lack of not wanting to put the effort into it. It's the lack of, I put so much effort into it for so long, I'm just completely defeated, and I'm not going to try anymore. It's too physically painful, and I know people don't understand that, but it's physically painful to continue to run up against that brick wall constantly. And if you do it for so long, well, then your brain just won't even allow you to try anymore.
Yeah, and I think you've experienced. Sorry, you experienced too that some kids get told, or the parents get told, if he would just apply himself more, he would do so much better, and they don't have the historical perspective. Now, this kid's been applying himself 10 times harder than his classmates have, and it hasn't gotten any better. We had one 10-year-old who was partway through a phonics program that was supposed to be effective, but she's like, look, I'm on level 10, mom, dad, I'm not getting any better. Can I just stop this program? Because she recognized this isn't changing anything. And usually when kids have had enough experience to see putting in the effort doesn't actually give a result, then the really aware and the kids who have good reasoning skills realize, well, then what's the point of putting in the effort? And so then it's because the struggle is actually the lead to the malaise or the lack of energy or the lack of effort. It's not the other way around. It's not the lack of effort that's causing the reading problems. It's a lack of progress in reading problems that's leading to what the article by Livingston all said is the number one cause of learning difficulties is low self-esteem. You've had so many negative experiences.
It's that that analogy I like to use of the elephant, the circus elephant. We've all seen it, like in a video or even maybe in person, where there's this huge elephant outside of the circus, and they're being held there by a chain around one of its foot. And you go, well, surely that elephant could break that chain if it wanted to. And you're absolutely 100% correct. If it couldn't break the chain, it could yank that stake up out of the ground and be gone. Well, the reason why it hasn't, and the reason why it won't, is because it's had that same chain and same stake tied around its foot for its entire life, and it's now come to the conclusion and believes that it can't do it. So therefore it won't. We're dealing with the same mental issue when we're dealing with children who have dyslexia and they don't get the services they need at an earlier and earlier age. That's why people want to say, well, if you don't remediate dyslexia earlier, early on, you can't dyslexia or can't remediate it. Right. Well, it's not that you can't remediate it, that you're going to have to go through all these psychological issues, get through all of those before you really start getting down to remediating the dyslexia.
Yeah. And that aspect of the struggle, and like some of the viewers have mentioned, leads to anxiety. And a little bit of anxiety from a neuropsych perspective is okay. A little bit of anxiety kind of bumps up your, acetylcholine level, which kind of bumps up your attention focus skills. And you're kind of, okay, I'm getting ready for this. This is going to be difficult. And you're kind of getting yourself really focused. But at some point, that anxiety level goes just a little bit too high. And now it actually literally shuts down the frontal lobes. And this is like the reasoning, problem-solving part of the brain. Or another way to say it is it's kind of like the conductor of the orchestra. This part's telling, the vision part to do its work and the language part to do its work, and it's telling the music part to stop thinking of that song because it's interfering with my language part, and it's kind of coordinating how all the parts work together. But when you have a child who constantly is going blank or constantly forgetting what to do or constantly not able to follow, directions in class that you practice at home that he could do, then you've got a very likely indicator that there's an anxiety issue. And if it hasn't been a part of your child's life for most of their life, then odds are it's not a genetic, just kind of endowment level of anxiety. It's secondary to other struggles. Now, it's not always learning disabilities. It can be sensory motor problems. It can be, language processing problems. It can be a language disorder. Kids who have difficulty listening and comprehending are going to be kind of hypervigilant in their environment because they're used to not really understanding what's going on. And so that creates anxiety. So there's things to tease apart of how much of it is language processing, how much of it is visual motor skills. Maybe they do really poorly with copying from the board down on paper. And so every time they get to that class period where everyone has to copy a paragraph down, their anxiety level goes up because they know they're being asked to do a skill they're not very good at.
And that's one of the reasons why we had, our boys got a copy of teacher notes
Yeah.
as one of the accommodations. And, we always got pushed. I don't know why this was the case, but we always got pushed back on that one particular accommodation, which was, well, he needs practice. He needs practice doing it. And I would always say, hey, look, we've just identified them. They're going through remediation at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He can do one of two things. He can listen, pay attention to what you're saying, or he can not listen and he can sit there and struggle to try to figure out how to spell the word and try to somewhat hold on to just a little bit of what you're talking about and get probably nothing out of it.
Yeah.
So which do you want? Well, I want him to pay attention. Great. That's the same thing I do. So let's give him a copy of the teacher's notes and let's move forward.
Exactly. Put those pieces in place. So many families are very familiar with, accommodations, supports, aids, and ideally those are great for short-term use. But it shouldn't be that those are going to be part of their whole academic career. They're going to have these additional supports because some of these skills are really able to be early intervened, early remediated, gaps closed. And, Kimberly raises an interesting question about, okay, what does IQ have to do with this? So let's say someone's got a low average IQ of 85. What that means is, okay, so if you have a distribution of 100 kids, if they have an IQ at 85, you're at about the 30th percentile. That means that 30% of kids have IQs lower than you, but 70% of kids have IQs higher than you. So it just kind of gives you an idea of where you fall in that rank of brain power that we call IQ. Now, there's all kinds of conversations about IQ that we're not going to go into, like, does it predict success? The answer is no. But understanding that, yeah, but if a child, we really can fully estimate their IQ from a neuropsych, from a rehab, from a remediation perspective, if you have an IQ that's 115, you're now at closer to the 65th percentile. That means your IQ is stronger than 65% of kids your age, and only about 35% have more brain power than you do. You're over here on the other end of what we call that bell-shaped curve of where a distribution of people is. Well, that serves as a benchmark to say, if we can get all of your skills up to that level, then you're going to feel more confident because you're going to be more competent. And this is where we use the phrase to say competence actually drives confidence. And so the IQ is not so much dictating what is the percentage of where someone falls. It's more of where they fall within the realm of comparison to a whole group of kids their age. But it gives us an idea of where to kind of work towards. And those are gaps that should be closed. People talk about the spiky profile of dyslexia because they got some skills here and some skills here, some skills here and some skills here. And it's just a spiky profile. But that implies that brains can't change skills. And all of the research says the opposite of that. All brain science research says very clearly the brain has the capability of rewiring, strengthening, increasing the connections, increasing the efficiency, and changing skills. So, one surefire way to decrease the drain on a child's mental health, the beat down on their self esteem, is as soon as possible, get those weaker skills stronger. Don't wait until age 7, 8, or 9. We know how to early intervene and early identify at age 4 and 5. So the
Well,
challenge always is, but how? How do you get access to the resources?
so I was being interviewed by a homeschool group, and we were talking about this very same topic. Where we're talking about confidence and what can we do to build up my child's self awareness, self confidence, that type of thing. And it's like, well, the only thing I've ever known to build confidence is success.
Mm-hmm.
So the more that your child is successful, the more confident they'll be with those skills. So this is where the more you use it, the better you become, the faster you become, then it becomes, that automaticity that we're striving for. And then you don't have that anxiety buildup of, as soon as I know that I'm going to sit down here and take this test, I know I have to read. Well, that immediately, like you were saying, shuts down that frontal lobe area. And that's where you go, man, I studied for this test all night long or all week long. We did flashcards, we did memorization, we did all of this stuff. And I sat down in front of the computer and nothing. I just drew complete blank. It's all gone. That's what that comes from.
Yeah.
And to understand that, then you start going, okay, now I get it. I understand why last night at home you got all your spelling words right and you got a 25 today.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not because you're dumb. It's not because you couldn't learn to do it. That anxiety shut it off, shut your brain off, and that's it.
100%.
So
And so as families see their child struggling, sometimes the opposite happens. Families don't know that their child is struggling. They're like, yeah, my daughter makes C's, she's not a academic. That's fine. And I've had families tell me that that's fine. We weren't worried about it. She can do whatever she wants. And we're not worried if she becomes an academic. She can go to college and get a degree in a field that she likes to do and doesn't have to ace the classes. But if you see increasing decline in your child's self-esteem, if you see increase in problem behaviors, not following house rules or acting out in different ways, you see increased social problems, they're starting to get in more trouble at school, then we need to be looking for what are the causal factors and find out, are there learning difficulties that are contributing to all those things, because we know there's ways to actually help change those causal factors if they are in truly learning difficulties, whether it's dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia.
So let me add to that, because that was one of the things that my parents used to say all the time is, look, I don't care if you get an A, just pass.
Right. Yeah.
Just get a C. And I never really put this together as a child, but after I started doing learning about advocacy in this way, I asked my mom one day, I was like, why, if you knew I had the ability and you knew I was smart enough to make A's, why would you ever accept a C?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you accept or allow me to accept something less than I could possibly be?
Right.
And her answer is a great answer, but her answer was, you were struggling so much, I just didn't want you to completely give up.
Right.
I
You
didn't want
want
to put any more pressure on you to make those straight A's when you were struggling to make a C, where at that point we're looking at grades as being the goal and not the learning, not the, hey, what do I do to help you gain these new skills and get you to where you really could be, that
yeah.
best version of yourself. And that's really what we're talking about.
And you think, is that how your family kept you in school until age 16? Was because they really worked to not overly stress you? They worked to try to not, put too much pressure. I know at times there was more pressure. At times there was heated exchanges and anger and, frustration. And in Trinidad, they call it licks, paddle or, punishments or timeouts or groundings, which do add frustrations.
You know, I don't know what was the matter of fact. I do know what the end result was for me of saying, "Forget it, I'm done." Quit high school. That really had to do with the no pass, no play,
Hmm.
and they finally took away football from me, and that was the only real thing that was keeping me engaged in school. I mean, to me now looking back on it, if you have a student that they're only really being successful in one of 8 classes, well, that child is not going to want to show up and perform at all, um, ever at that point. So finally, I get to a point where I'm like, look, there's nothing here for me anymore. And I think from my parents' perspective, um, they were just so drained. They were tired of the fight. They didn't know what else to do, and I truly believe at some point they believed they what I call believing the lie, which is there's really nothing else we can do.
Hmm.
The teachers and the administrators and everybody that's the counselors that are there at school, they're all there for the child's best interest, and if there was something that they could do, they would have done it. So there's nothing else we can do. And I think that's where a lot of families end up. They believe that there's nothing else that the school can do because if there was, they would do it. So, parents put 100% trust in the school district. School districts are, they want to do the right thing. However, they're just not trained to do the right thing. They're not trained to provide the service the way that the service needs to be provided. Therefore, and on top of that, there's a systemic failure of identification.
Yeah.
Just identifying the kids that are struggling so much because there's so many kids. I mean, it's kind of one of those. They see everything as a nail out there, right? They're using the hammer for everything.
Yep. And here's a new question, Stephen. I'm putting it up here by Gabriella. She's saying, her kid's school doesn't have a qualified psychologist to evaluate or to follow up or to help. And yeah, we used to have guidance counselors and psychologists. We have very little of either in schools now. She's very discouraged at school. Her teachers and her sped teachers, sure, they're genuine, loving, caring people, want her to do well, but she's in her last grade of high school. She's in 12th grade next year. She's not looking forward to higher education, which means she may be considering not going to college, even though she might be plenty bright enough for it. And she feels like she won't be able to compete or even cope with college classes. So, question is, could a program like Now Programs Online or a Moore Center Clinic, or another evidence-based dyslexia remediation program help her get caught up? The research answer, Gabrielle, is yeah, 100%. There's tons of studies showing we can close the gaps in skills. Doesn't matter if you're 6 or 86, or maybe 16 or 66. The brain's capability to rewire and take weaker skills and make them stronger exists lifelong. The only limiting factor is getting access to the services, which means Is it of a price point the family can afford? Is it accessible to them? And time-wise, logistically, can they organize to get them to those services as frequently or as intensively as they need to be delivered? That's our best chance to close those gaps. We have a YouTube channel as well that your daughter might be interested in. That's actually at Now Programs Online on YouTube. And there's a girl on that YouTube talking with her parents. Her name's Kaylee. And she, in that video, is talking about how at age, I think she's about 13 or so in that video, she's now gone from being the last kid done in her class, the last kid to finish anything, the slowest reader, to actually now she's up in the top of her class and she's no longer struggling to read. And we did a video with Kaylee last week on Wednesday, and she's in our other podcast called Dyslexia Success. And Gabrielle, your daughter might be interested to see Kaylee, who's now in her 20s. She's now a college graduate from a competitive nursing program, graduated college with honors, graduated high school as a salutatorian, and she works in a level 1 trauma center as an emergency department nurse. So yes, 100%, there's clear evidence that it's not too late. It's not too far gone. It's a question of how to get access to Now programs or something that might be as powerful as that program to begin to close these gaps and let these students now function at their full potential. Because Kaylee had a high IQ. Her IQ was about 115, like about the 65th, or so percentile, which meant we knew she had the capability to have all of her skills functioning up their IQ level. But the question was, how do we get them there? What can we do about that? And we've had data like this coming out for decades showing that kids can close the gaps, but you want to be finding the programs that have been scientifically tested and proven to be effective. That's our other bigger challenge. Another great question for us, Stephen. Other than remediating the dyslexia, how do you go about rebuilding the child's self-esteem and confidence after years of school trauma? And let me highlight that phrase, years of school trauma. I tell pediatricians quite regularly, one of the most traumatizing or one of the most common sources of trauma for children are these 65% of children who do not read proficiently in our school systems across every state of the United States. Let me say that again. The national data shows that for more than 51 years, over 60% of kids are not proficient readers. And it's been that way for more than 50 years. That means every day they come to school not having the skills to actually be successful. And being given a job that you don't have the skills to do is the recipe for disaster and trauma. You're being beat down every day long. Unfortunately, it takes like 3 million success experiences to combat the 1 million failure experiences. And so you really try to work to find the small wins that keep, praising, the small wins to keep focusing on, and those kind of small steps.
But can I jump in there real quick?
Yeah.
I would add a couple of things here. So when I've talked to people that are getting ready to go to the clinic and or to start the Now program, I give them this advice. I want you to record yourself before and after. I want you to record yourself talking about your child's struggles. I want you to record your child talking about their struggles and how they feel. And I want you to record them reading, and I want you to do it again afterwards. I said, because the more you see the success, and this is a short amount of time also, the more success you see, you forget the painful scenarios or the painful memories quicker and quicker. And by the time you get through the program completely, you will have forgotten how painful it was to begin with. So not necessarily do we want to remember the pain, but I want you to remember how far you've come.
Right. Which is called celebrating the small wins.
Right.
And Amy, that point is, look for every small win you can celebrate, model positive self-talk, encourage her, and you can acknowledge her frustration. I only got an 80. Well, yeah, but that's better than a 60. But I understand it sounds like you wish you got a higher grade than an 80. I understand that. and also helping model for your children how that growth mindset works. And that's the new popular buzz term of growth mindset. Decades ago, we called it positive thinking. How does positive thinking work? So, positive thinking is, if you keep beating yourself down and not giving yourself any credit for your successes, then you're actually now helping hold down your own self esteem. Why would you want to do that? It's not going to help you. And some kids are a little worried. Some kids are a lot worried. They're like, you know what? They don't feel safe taking the risk of beginning to see themselves as somebody competent. It's a big risk to begin to believe that, hey, actually, I can read well. Hey, actually, I am pretty smart, because that puts you up at a higher ledge that you could get knocked down again if you're not going to, if you don't happen to be as successful as you hoped you would be. And so it's trying to set realistic expectations for your child. And I think a good way to explain this too is we have another video on the at Now Programs Online YouTube channel of a little girl, Emma. And she's talking with her mom, and she's so excited that she's reading now and she comprehends what she's reading. And she looks at her mom with these big eyes and says, "What happens if when I leave the Morris Center, it all goes away? All the skills go back to where I couldn't read. I had to get the lower level books when my classmates got the higher level books." And fortunately, then in a clinic environment, we have a psychologist working with kids every week, helping rebuild self-esteem, helping, deal with their concerns, their worries, and just let them know, well, think of it this way. When you learned how to ride a bike and you had really good bike riding skills, if you took a break for a few weeks or for a month or for a year, were all the skills completely gone when you came back to picking up your bike? And the answer is no, they're still there. Now, if it's been 10 years, mom or dad, you might be a little rusty on your bike riding skills, but they're not gone. So the power of the brain is, once you've built these skills to a level of automaticity, which means they're effortless, they're really strong, they don't take much work or effort, and you can do it without thinking about it that much, then we know the brain's capability of maintaining that skill set is very, very long. It's going to extend a much longer period of time. But the other piece too, Amy, is to consider some supportive counseling, some counseling with their pastor, counseling with, a friend, just someone to really help them have someone to talk this stuff through, but also watching more videos where other people went through the same struggles. And I think, Stephen, that's a big asset to your podcast, the Empower Dyslexia. You've interviewed a lot of people who also went through struggles. And it's not the Richard Branson Made by Dyslexia. Let's pretend that it doesn't matter that you struggled. Let's pretend you have superpowers. I'm not a big fan of that part of it, because that just means you shove stuff under the rug and act like it's not there. It's more of the
Well,
context of
let,
talking to
let
people
me
who push through. Yeah.
let me jump in there. And so you and I are on the same page with superpower. That just burns me up.
Yeah.
And the reason why it does, and I want people to understand, you got to know your audience,
Right.
right? If you're dealing with a younger child, you don't want to browbeat them and get them to think that, no, you can't know this. You don't want to immediately, they don't understand dyslexia and what it is and that it can be remediated. Everybody's just trying to keep their self-esteem up because they're just now newly understanding or hearing about, I have a disability, right?
Yeah.
We talk about strengths and weaknesses. And if we get our weaknesses to the level of our strengths, well, now I tell people, now you can have your superpower. You can be the best version of yourself. However, if you constantly say, well, I'm not real good at reading, but I can do, insert here
Right.
better than anybody else, it doesn't mean that you can do that thing better than anybody else because of dyslexia.
Right.
So we dyslexics tend to build up survival skills. And that's what most people would call our compensation skills. They're survival because we've been put into an environment for what we, at that point in time, could not be successful in until we're remediated properly with programs that are proven to rewire the brain. One thing I wanted to say back to Amy real quick, because she talked about the school district gaslighting her child
Yeah.
and blaming the child. Well, I mean, that's pretty typical that these are the type of behaviors that happen. They blame the child, they blame the parent. I tend to turn this back around on them and say it can only be one of three things. It can be the child, it can be the program or the methodology that you're using, or it's the instructor. Did the child show up ready, willing, and able to do the work every day? Yes. Well, then it's not the child. So which of the other two is it? Is it your program or is it your teacher? And that tends to make them rethink the way that they are trying to put the blame on somebody else. I understand why they're doing it, because they're highly, what they feel like, they're highly educated people, which I have no doubt that they are. They've gone through many years of college. They've done lots of studying. Don't have any, not questioning that. So they believe that, hey, I learned it. I sat through the classes. So if you can't learn it, it's you, not me. So getting people to understand that that's not it. We go back to our analogy that we use all the time about a cake. I give 10 people all the ingredients in the cake and don't give anybody the instructions or directions on how to make that cake. I'm not getting one cake right. I'm getting a bunch of mixed up ingredients that didn't bake and didn't rise. So then you go, this is what we're talking about. If you don't do it in the right steps with the right ingredients and the right duration, you're not going to get any of it. And now that we understand that these skills that we're learning build on each other, and if you don't have the proper underlining skill, that upper skill will never work correctly. And that's when you start seeing those splintered skills that these children will have going on through life.
And I'm going to throw a post up, Stephen. This one's really geared towards the parents. This is a book. It's called 13 Things Mentally Strong Parents Don't Do: Raising Self-Assured Children and Training Their Brains for a Life of Happiness, Meaning, and Success. And so, I didn't like that one. But it's really just focusing on there's ways that you can put additional resources in practice for the parent, but those resources may just be um, helping you understand more skills that you can use as a parent to help your child. But these books tend to focus on kids who don't have learning disabilities. And so the other viewer, Gabriella, was asking, can we put some other links up there that would be places to start? And, if you want to learn more about what our remedial services, these are ones that I'm involved in. And that's that nowprograms.com. They do free consultations, free discussions. They'll review records with you. They'll talk about the programs. I mean, they'll spend as much time explaining these to you as you want to have a conversation about. Um, but there's also the YouTube channel that has the links. It helps you see what can you be doing that might give your child a chance to think about, hey, maybe there's more possibility than what I believed is really possible in terms of what can be done to help strengthen my skills. Because like you said, Stephen, at some point, students begin to believe that you can't change those skills. So here's a link to the Now Programs YouTube channel as well. And that just gives you more access to, sometimes your kids will be willing to watch a video. Like there's some of me talking as a brain scientist, or some of Stephen talking, there's other kids talking, there's other parents and families talking about how their skills have been changed, to at least begin to plant the seed.
Let's add another analogy or visualization. Have you ever seen pictures of little kids and they're going to jump over something? They're riding their bike and they can jump a ramp, or they're going to jump over a creek. And the first time before they ever do it, they're sitting there just bawling, crying. No, I can't do it. And they're scared and they don't want to do it. After that first time that they are successful at doing it and they jump over it, Then they're just like, they're making the block, jumping it again, jumping it again, jumping it again. Hey, look at me, no hands, you know. That is the building of success.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that we have to do whenever we're doing remediation for dyslexia, for any other type of learning disability. We had a question come up about how does other disabilities or comorbidities, how do they factor into the struggle with, okay, you're motivated, you've got dyslexia and ADHD and, you know, sensory processing, or maybe even a speech delay or speech disorder. How does those other comorbidities along with dyslexia cause the remediation to slow down, or cause the struggle or the anxiety to be that much more?
Well, and I think too, another piece for Nadine's question is, if the intervention you're in is changing one set of skills, like maybe you're changing your reading and spelling skills, but you still have an articulation problem, then you're going to be making progress with the self-esteem related to academics, but it may not be making progress with self-esteem related to public speaking or articulation. And it may be that those take some, a series of interventions over time to get as many of these weaker skills stronger. But it's also helping your child learn to build that growth mindset of, give yourself credit for what you are doing, give yourself credit for what you are changing. And look, it is changing. So what might happen to the articulation problems when you get a time or a chance or have the resources to really work on those, and help them begin to, one, give themselves some credit for what they are accomplishing, but two, to acknowledge that, hey, if this changes, then why couldn't other skills change? And it's just trying to raise that awareness of the possibility. And more than one occasion, either myself, Stephen, or you, we've had to talk to kids who are teenagers who are depressed. And like the other mom mentioned earlier, they don't want to do another intervention. They're sure that they don't work. They've tried 3 or 4 interventions. And I've seen, yeah. Well, and I've seen teenagers who they've had to be pulled out of school because there's so much struggle for them. And it's not IQ. The ones I'm thinking of have been kids who have above average IQs, but there's so much struggle that they've become so depressed and they just don't want to take a chance anymore. But if we can at least get them to, okay, well, watch this TED talk or watch this science talk, or, hey, watch this kid before and after. Maybe we found somebody who knows a little bit more, who might be able to do a little bit more. And we've had situations happen again and again where we just got the kid to give us like a 20% chance that we might be able to help, or, hey, give us 4 weeks. Just give us a try for 4 weeks. Let's see what we can do. See if this actually might be different than what you've ever experienced. And it actually might be helping change things. So you're trying to get them at least just open a small window of opportunity. And one of the students we did that with, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, his mom just messaged us last week and said, thanks for taking the time to give him the consideration that he might be able to do this with a program that's evidence-based and been peer-reviewed and shown scientifically to be effective. Not because tutor A thinks it helps or tutor B thinks it helps, or, teacher, auntie, neighbor, not because someone's opinion is it. No, that there's actual proven research. And that boy today is now a high school graduate with honors and off to go do his college career. So over and again, we've got the possibility to break through the depression, the anxiety, the low self-esteem. But sometimes it's a combination of things. There's got to be some, professional support of mental health support. There's got to be some progress changing the skills that are really the causal factors for the anxiety, for the depression, for the low self-esteem. And you're trying to use as many resources as the family has to make as much change in as many areas as is possible. If you have to pick 1 or 2, I'm just going to say the number one thing that's going to change the thing that got you to the point where you're at. If it's the years of school failure that got your child to the depression, then odds are it's going to be changing those academic skills as soon as possible. That has the best chance of changing the trajectory of their self-esteem and might be making them even more engaged in professional counseling and support.
I would add in there, um, to really understand that, don't allow that piece of it to linger. And the reason why I'm saying don't allow it to linger, I give you an analogy or a quick story here. I used to be haunted by a reoccurring dream. And this reoccurring dream was me having to go back to school and try to graduate.
Hmm.
And I remember, I mean, it's so vivid. And it was into my 40s.
Isn't that
I
called
had
a
this dream.
nightmare, Stephen?
Yeah,
That's actually
yeah.
called a nightmare. Yeah.
It was constant. I was trying to get back into high school so I could graduate. All I wanted to do is graduate and try to get back on the football team, because now I know I can do it. Coach, I'll be better. I'll play better. You know,
Yeah. I won't lose my
my talent.
eligibility.
Yeah, my talent wasn't ever a question. It was, I won't lose eligibility. I won't let you down again. I won't let my teachers down again. And that was a black cloud that followed me for a long time.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say this: that's where that success model really has to come into play. We really need to make sure that we are providing that intervention so that the success can erase those, that PTSD, can
Yeah.
erase that anxiety, that depression, because I can promise you, as I'm sitting here today, they will come back up
Yeah.
later on in life. Unless we deal with it now, it will come back. It'll come up, because I tell people all the time, you as a person can't lie to yourself,
Right.
right? You can tell people how great you are and how good you do things and whatever, but when you lay your head down at night, you know for a fact you still can't read. You know for a fact you feel like a fake, or
Mhm.
a liar.
Or you're always covering it up. You
Or
never
you're
have to
you're
stop
you're
hiding.
always covering it up.
Yeah.
You're always hiding something, and you don't know why you always feel this way. So that's the reason why I'm saying, let's deal with all of this failure now. Let's get it out of the way, and then you will become the best version that you can. That's where what you put in, you'll get out.
Right.
It's 100% true in this scenario,
Yeah.
and that's after you've built the skills to do these things. I'm not saying, um, just because you get out here and try to do something and you haven't got the skills yet, that all of a sudden you're going to put a bunch of effort into it. Well, effort in that case isn't going to cause success. It's
Right.
being the effort and being taught the proper skills to be able to get to that goal or that success.
So, Stephen, let's do just a quick recap, and I'll hit it from the psych perspective, and you hit it from the parent advocate perspective and the adult with remediated dyslexia perspective. My recap for parents from this talk is, yeah, we know there's a very strong connection between mental health and learning disabilities, and it's a negative connection, which means the higher the learning disability, the lower the self-esteem, the worse the mental health, the more likelihood of anxiety, of depression, and not hate to say it, but even suicide. Suicide has some direct connections for many individuals and teenagers to their learning struggles. And as early as we can begin to identify, has this child always had anxiety? Have they always been kind of more sad? Have they always been kind of a worrier? Okay, well, that means get to the healthcare professionals, get to the counselor, get to the ones who deal with it's just more part of their typical personality makeup, and really work on some evidence-based practices to change those self-talk, those viewpoints, those kind of mentalities they hold on to. But if the child's been happy most of your life until we hit age 7, 8, or until we hit their first year of struggle at 5th grade, and now all of a sudden as school performance goes lower, their healthcare, mental health problems get larger, then we know that it's actually a chicken and the egg of it's the learning struggles contributing to the growing number of behavior problems, increased anxiety, worries, self-harming, social behavioral problems, rule-breaking things. Those are things that we know it's not the behavioral problems that are the cause, they're the symptom. And get to the intervention as soon as possible with as much intensity as possible, which means as many hours per day, as many days per week, because the more you increase that, the steeper the growth happens and the faster they begin to actually decrease those causal factors.
So I'll add I use a saying that we don't teach a drowning person to swim. That's kind of crazy analogy, but I mean, I want you to picture that. You don't go up to the dock, seeing somebody drown, going, "Hey, flap your arms, paddle really fast,
Mhm.
kick your legs." Well, they're already doing all of those things. You need to reach down, pick them up, dry them off, put your arms around them, let them know that they're safe. Because safety is the first thing that we have to
Yeah.
do with our kids, right? We
Excellent
have to
point.
have an area where they're safe, where they have a reprieve from their disability,
The struggle.
right? So that's the first thing. Put your arms around your kids, tell them you love them, tell them you care. I know all of y'all are doing that already, but take a step back and really understand that that's what your child needs first, is that safe space. Then what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're asking all the right questions.
Right.
What is the program that you're using with my child, or what is the methodology that you're using with my child? Where is the research behind showing that this is, number one, appropriate, and number two, works? Do you show any of that? And if they don't have any of that documentation, then you need to move on, and move on quickly. I tell parents all the time, we have 13 years to get our kids ready for the next chapter in their life. That's 13 Christmases, 13 Thanksgivings, 13 summers. That's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's over before we know it. I mean, I'm living that now. I've got one that's just finished his first year in college, one that's going to his first year in college, and one that's going to be a junior. I've sat here and watched how quickly this happens. So we don't have time to sit back and, well, let's just wait and see if it clicks. Wait and seeing if it clicks, to me, is the same thing as teaching a drowning person to swim.
Right.
We don't want to be the foot on top of the head and push them under the water. So just know that there are programs out there that have been tested and proven to change your child's skills, to rewire the brain. And I mean, to be real frank, is to give them that success that they've been longing for since kindergarten, since when they got in. I mean, think about it. If you start at kindergarten, and you're not identified till third, fourth, or fifth grade, think about how many years of failure you've had. Now you've got to go back and deal with all that trauma first. So then you can start working on that remediation. So we're here, we hear you, we hear the struggle, and that's the reason why we fight so hard to make sure that the parents get the most relevant information to make the best educated decision to help their child and help their family to move forward.
Good advice, Stephen. And we know, again, to let folks know, free consultations, free support at nowprograms.com. You can click on the consultation link, book a free visit with one of our intake experts. They'll help you find more steps. Doesn't mean that we're the only program. We know that we're not, but we want to help you figure out what's the best option for you, your kids, because the sooner we make the growth, the sooner the kids and the family get a better quality of life. And that's a win-win for all of us. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thanks for your great questions. Next week is a Dyslexia Success Stories week. We'll be back with dyslexia discussions in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night and a great weekend.
Good night.